What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Quill and Hammer. I'm Trevor. This is Zeke. And Zeke, what we doing today?
Well, we're going to keep going with our Marvel reforging. And today we're going to be talking about Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings. So let's start it off the same way we always did. What did you think of the film?
You know what? I went into this with, again, same thing as Black Widow. Zero expectations. It was, I was expecting to not like the film at all, but I actually loved the movie. I had a great time watching it. I think they did a really good job. It was a fun way to introduce someone new. Um, I like like the family dynamic a little bit. I thought it was a great film. What did you think, Zach? You're more into Marvel and whatever. You and your wife kept up on it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it was fine, but it felt I have a few problems with it. It didn't hit all the marks for me. Um, Shang-Chi as a character, I think is fine. I think when he shows up again in the Marvel universe, his 10 rings are going to be a cool power to see, you know what I mean? Something fun to use, but it felt very disconnected from the rest of the Marvel universe. And I'm not talking about cameos, I'm not talking about anything like that. It felt disconnected. It was an okay film, but it didn't feel like it fit into the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe. Um,
Wh- I'm trying to I'm trying to piece that together. What do you mean? I mean, I'm trying to think because it's been so long since they introduced someone really new. But like, give me your explanation on that because I'm thinking, well, how else do you introduce someone outside of an Avengers film?
there's no connection to what's going on in the rest of the world. No mention of, you know, Infinity War or Endgame or the events that took place there. No mention of, you know, the New World Order. There's nothing. You know what I mean? It's like it acts as if none of those things have ever happened. And I think that was an okay way to approach it when you were starting out, when you had, the first Iron Man film, maybe the second, and then you have Thor, right? Or then you have Captain America. But so much has happened, and sure, they had Wong as the cameo, right? And he's funny. I love Wong, but there was just a disconnect. There was it was as if none of those things had ever happened, right? And apart from that, and this isn't necessarily a criticism of the film, just that it didn't have the same vibe as a Marvel film. The mystical aspects of it, which I'm assuming are drawing heavily from Eastern culture, which I enjoyed. Like I don't have a problem with that, but it didn't have the same feel as a superhero movie. It felt more martial artsy and I don't know what I'm getting at. The feeling of the film just didn't feel like it fit into the vibes of a Marvel movie. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
I get what you're saying. I don't agree because I think at this point Marvel is in a transitionary stage. It doesn't matter where it doesn't necessarily need to copy the Iron Man 2 or Thor or any other vibe. I think we can we can take it wherever we want. I like that they bring a new take to the Marvel universe in. I don't think that's a bad thing. I again, I loved the Eastern themes. My, major in college was Asian studies, so it was right at home for me. So I was like, "Ooh, that's real Mandarin. Hooray!" You know. Um, but I I don't know. I thought it was a lot of fun and good enough, and I didn't have any problem with it fitting into the Marvel universe. Because again, the mystical, the whatever it's called, the the powers, being around other people, you have, the underground fight club thing, like that's really cool. I think it fits in with Endgame happened and people are trying to rebuild their lives. Again, you don't know. I think we fall into the same problem with what happened to Natasha's family during
Sure.
Endgame. Um, because all we really know is that all of the Avengers and superheroes and whoever who are established end up being in. Do they fight in Wakanda? Is that where
That's
Endgame,
in no, that's in Infinity War.
Infinity War? Where
Final
does?
battle happens at the Avengers HQ
Okay, well,
in
so
Endgame.
yeah, so everyone is assembled. For Endgame, and they have that fight or whatever, and that's all the heroes and things. But the dad, and I can't remember what his name is. Um, and I'm looking
Wenwu,
it up right now. Wu,
Wenwu,
Wenwu.
I think. I don't know.
Yeah, he's not a hero,
Right.
and I don't think that's a bad thing. He's not a hero. He's out just doing um his own thing. He's been alive for 1,000 years, so like, who cares? He's like over, like, I don't know, maybe when you get to that point, you're like, whatever. My wife just died, my kids, whatever. I don't have hope for anything else. Um, so he's just doing his thing. I don't mind that. I think it falls into that we need to bring people in, but how do we bring people in and explain that gosh, what am I trying to say? Explain that they weren't at Endgame. But it's like there are billions of people on the earth, and I think that's fine. I think if he's just doing his thing, like you introduce someone else. And yeah, Sean is still in the United States and things are happening or whatever, but he's just trying to live a low-key life. I think that's fine.
I understand they shouldn't be in Endgame. I'm not saying they should have showed up in Endgame. What I'm saying is there wasn't really a mention of there were no consequences from what happened in Endgame displayed in the film. That's more what I'm getting at. I agree. I like that the dad wasn't a hero. He was a villain. You know what I mean? I I guess I'm just saying that it felt like that had never happened. And this was its own Earth, its own universe. That's more what I'm getting at. It felt like it
Okay.
was in the multiverse more than happening on the same universe Earth that all the other Avengers movies have happened in. That's more what I'm getting at. And
Okay,
I
so
think another part of the not part of the problem, but kind of one of the factors that factors into it is when you have these globe spanning movies like the Avengers, the world starts to get smaller, you know, and so it becomes harder to reconcile the fact that there is this whole other nation that has remained hidden and is holding off an ancient evil. And I'm not necessarily criticizing that, but it's like, you had Wakanda that stayed hidden. Now you have this village that stays hidden, and it's I guess I just feel like the world is becoming too small to keep having these kinds of societies, these kinds of plot lines. There's only so much of the world that hasn't been mapped out at this point. You know what I mean? In terms of what we've seen um in the MCU, and I know there are tons of places where these things could be, but it begins to feel like the world is too small to accommodate all of these. That's sort of the vibe that I'm getting.
So I disagree with that particular point because even though the world feels smaller, there are still billions of people on the earth. And the world is a big place. But more importantly, I feel like there is precedent because Shangri-La is like a thing in the real world. Like that's a legend of this, mystical, amazing society or place in China that like exists. How many movies or how many video games have we played that have that as like a thing? I can think of two, but I mean, come on. So like the Mummy it has that idea. Um, you've got Uncharted 2, the video game, like that's a thing. Like this is a thing that it exists. So I don't mind that. I can buy into, yeah, there's this other spot that, no one really believes it's there, so no one's really looking for it, and it's in the middle of nowhere in China, and no one goes into China anyway because the government is so controlling there that like it doesn't bother me that this might exist. So there's that. But as far as the no consequences of Endgame, I can concede that point. There should at least be like, the 5 year people that came back, a little bit of mention of that, unless the assumption is people are just trying to go on with their lives, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know how. I guess my problem with that is how do we keep bringing that up in every film in a way that makes sense before it gets redundant. And I will say this though. This is the first real film that is, after Endgame that's in the modern day, right?
Right.
So there should be something, and I agree with that. I feel like that is a downfall because Natasha, gosh, Black Widow and Natasha and whatever, that happened before Infinity War.
Right.
So this is again, it is the first film after we do Infinity War. So it or not Infinity War, after Endgame. So there should be some tie-in to like what are normal people doing during that time? What happened?
When
How do
I
you how do you reconcile that? So I think I agree with that point.
and half of that village should have disappeared, and maybe that, I don't know, maybe it factors into why they're so abrasive. I mean, I know they're guarding the portal or whatever to make sure the demon doesn't get out, but I don't know, I just there was just a disconnect. Show some homeless people saying, we blipped or whatever, you know, that sort of thing. Just make a mention of it and I'll be satisfied. Unless we're saying that this happened before Endgame, which I don't think we're saying.
No, I think this happens in present day, which at the time would have been 2021.
Okay.
Supposedly, I guess they don't explicitly say because it was filming in, 2018, 2019, but it came out in 2021. So that would be a, you know, present day whenever should be
Right.
somewhere in that time. So I don't know exactly how long after Endgame it was, but Endgame clearly happened and it is now, it says it is set after the events of Avengers Endgame during the days leading up to the Qingming Festival in early April. Um, that's what Wikipedia says.
But after the events of Endgame.
Hmm.
So they're just I I need to see some fallout from that,
Right.
because the world's still recovering. There are new factions and new lines drawn in the sand to represent territories. There should be more fallout present.
There should be. And to be fair, I do think that they did a good job kind of with, Wenwu, like he has his, 10 rings gang. They've kind of been active and doing whatever for at least, has it been 10 years or 8 years or whatever, however long since Sean left and came back?
Hmm.
Like that's, or longer than that, because it was when his mother died that the dad really was like,
Forget it.
that failed, so
Hmm.
I'm gonna go full evil again. So I don't feel like that's I don't know, an issue. Like the lines in the sand are being drawn and everything. But I agree, there needs to be some sort of fallout or chaos or whatever associated with that. So I will agree with that point, but what else? What else bothered you?
So aside from that, um, I feel like they tried to do two two different villains, right? You
Right,
had you had the dad, and then you had the demon thing, that was the destroyer, whatever they call it, right?
right.
And because you kind of split your time, I feel like they both fell flat a little bit. I like the family dynamic. I like, you know, man finds woman, woman helps him see the world differently. He settles down, has a family, woman dies, and he loses hope and, returns to his old life, despite the fact that he has kids. Then his kids have to deal with the fallout, and then there's that clash. That's a real world problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I like that dynamic. But then, you get to the village. It's not Shangri-La, is it? Did
No, I
they
can't
say
remember
it's,
what it's called, but no.
but whatever, the village. They get to the village and um the dad makes breaks the wall and the demons come out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you had to have something driving conflict, but I don't know, it fell a little flat. There wasn't enough conflict between specifically the dad and Sean. I wanted more conflict. I don't know, it just kind of fell flat. It's like they go to the compound and everything seems fine, but then he reveals that he's gonna go do this thing and it's gonna release the demon. They're like, well, we got to stop him. then they throw him in prison, and then they race there, and they have the one fight, which I mean, it was a good fight. I enjoyed the fight, but it felt like there should be more. There should be more dialogue, conflict between Sean and his dad to really drive home the fact that he's, the emotion of the film. Just I didn't get a whole lot of that. There wasn't a whole lot of emotion. I didn't really care that Sean and his dad were going head to head. It was like, yeah, well, his dad was a prick. I don't know what to tell you. He's gonna destroy the world. He's gonna kill him. Like, whatever, it and I guess the thing is it fell from father son clash to this is just a bad guy who needs to be stopped. And for that reason, I feel like they missed an opportunity to bring some real heavy emotion into the film. And maybe I don't know, we'll talk about how I think you can fix that, but that's another problem that I have. And maybe it's because you had to focus on the demon thing. Maybe they just missed some opportunities. I don't know. But bottom line is there wasn't enough emotion between the clash of father and son. And same with passing on the rings. It was kind of like, oh shiz, well, I finally met my end. Here, son. There I wanted more emotion in
See,
this.
I understand what you are saying from a Western point of view, but in my experience, that is not how family and familial things happen on the other side of the world. Granted, it is getting um more and more, what's the word? Modernized, I guess. But there is still a very deep familial, like, these are your parents. You do what they say kind of thing. And it's ingrained in uh, the especially Chinese, Japanese, Korean culture where to me, Sean not going back and his daughter secretly learning, martial arts in the background, like that is conflict and rebellion from that point of view because you do what your parents say. They're the end all be all. So going against them at all is a big deal. And not only do they go against him, like you can see the conflict. Like I'm imagining, or not imagining, go back to the scene where uh Sean shows up at his sister's fight club thing and
Mhm.
has the fight and she beats him up and whatever, and then the dad shows up. The dad, like, is clearly more powerful. They don't have anything to do. He has finally said enough is enough, and they kind of like there's like, well, what else can we do? You you fought the minions, you lost. The dad is here. That's it. And so I disagree with the not enough emotion. It was not enough Western emotion, but the conflict familially is there. Um, Especially because they take him back to the compound and they still speak up and speak out, and then he throws him in jail. That kind of thing is irregular, and I think they were trying to split the difference between Western and Eastern and that idea of modernizing and the world changing a little bit. But to me, that wasn't a sore point or a sticking out point to me because of, I guess, my background in Asian studies and things. So I didn't see it as a problem, but I understand what you are saying because to us, especially with like movies and TV shows and everything, it's like nowadays people sass and backtalk and fight with their parents and everyone, and it kind of turns into um a big emotional fight, drawn out kind of thing. Um, I don't know. I get what you're saying, and to a degree, I think it that would have been more helpful for us because yeah, um, it did fall a little tiny bit flat. The scene where Sean, fights his dad, he gets punched into the middle of the pond or whatever, and then the dragon wakes him back up and goes and they do whatever. That scene should have been more or could have been more or the build up. Um and again, going back to the what's the real issue behind it, they didn't build up the real conflict between, or maybe not the real conflict, the link between the dad thinking that they're holding the mom prisoner behind the wall. That wasn't built up enough for me to believe that someone who's been around for 1,000 years and has killed a whole bunch of people and knows all of these things would be hoodwinked that easily. That's the thing that bothers me about the dad the most, is that, and it's my only complaint with the movie really, is they were just like, well, we need a reason for the dad to want to tear down this wall. Let's have this voice, you
Right.
know? But to me, there should have been something different, like the ninja face mask, three ninja guy. You know what I'm talking about? The one that
Hmm.
meets Sean and the other girl. Like maybe that person is actually manipulating the father and has been for years. And, like there should be something other than the dad was just so lonely and thought he could, you know, bring his wife back or that she was still really alive or whatever when they knew that was not the case. He knows what death looks like. That was not the case.
Right.
So that's my only real complaint about it. Um, and I think trying to have the dad um, being manipulated and influenced weakens him as a character, and then it has no weight to what the voice behind the wall, the soul eater thing, is actually doing.
Right.
So I guess that's my conflict. I think that they didn't do a good enough job setting up that the manipulation or the complacency of the dad, or and I don't know. That's my sticking point.
I hadn't considered that. You do make a good point, but I was hung up on all these other things to even notice that. Too hung up to notice those things.
Yeah,
Um, I I understand what you say with, the difference between Eastern and Western cultures. And I don't have a problem with them bringing, um, more Eastern ideas and influences into the film. I think that's totally fine. But you have to just reconcile the fact that it's not going to resonate with Western audiences. And that's fine. Not every movie has to be for every person. And I'm not saying that it does, but just you have to decide who you want to appeal to. You can't please everyone unless you're making a Spider-Man film. So
that's a good point.
just saying.
I mean, I am just saying. But I want to counter that with this. Um, there are what, 330 million people in the United States?
Mhm.
And if Disney is trying to expand their global audience and Marvel is trying to expand their global audience. There are 1.2 billion people in China
Well,
and more in
I'm like
Korea
I
and
said,
whatever. So I'm, just as a counter to that point, I agree. I think that it did really well, I'm sure, in the Eastern Asian countries. The and I think, and this is, maybe we get into reforging a little bit, but I think if we solved the problem of the dad and the soul eater, whatever, I think you wouldn't have gotten as caught up on these little tiny things. I could be wrong, but I feel like the because the father's motivation wasn't quite strong enough and wasn't like he didn't, it was, the fight is mom's dead. Why are we killing, why do you want me to become a killer now? What are we doing this for? Um, and his motivation is, well, there's this voice in my head, sounds like your mother, telling me that she's alive. But that doesn't quite resonate very well. It's a weak reason for him to be manipulated.
right.
And because of that, the conflict is weak and the payoff is weak because that's it. So I feel like the problem isn't there's not enough conflict between Sean and his dad. It's that the sticking point is the dad's motivation isn't really believable because this 1,000-year-old guy isn't like he's been around for 1,000 years. He has seen literally everything, and I don't think he's going to be manipulated that easily by a voice in his head.
Well, I agree with that, and maybe had you had well, and but I guess that's kind of my point too. It's that plot point doesn't bring in enough emotion for me. Emotion, motivation, whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't add enough to the plot. It doesn't bolster it up. It feels thread thin, you know. But going back to just briefly about the amount of people in the Eastern Asian countries, I totally understand that. And I'm not saying that Marvel needs to only appeal to Western audiences because, like I
Right,
said, the potential for revenue is much greater in those countries because you have such a higher population.
right,
And I understand that. And I'm not criticizing them for bringing in these kinds of ideas. All I'm saying is that you have to understand, they have to understand that it's not going to resonate as as deeply with their Western audiences. They have to decide who they're going to please. And
right,
if they choose to please the Eastern Asian countries, that's totally fine. But that was my only point, was just that, you have to
right,
cut your losses at some point. You have to be okay that some people in the Western countries aren't going to love it as much as they could have.
right.
And
And
that's just a decision.
I agree with that. My point is, I think that they didn't split the difference well enough. I
Okay.
think so. So go to the other side. Um, Endgame and Infinity War and all of these movies are doing really well globally, as well as, here in the United States. And they're strictly, like really Western focused.
Hmm.
And I don't think that what am I trying to say? I don't think they struggled from, globally they didn't struggle to resonate with people and whatever because the plot and the themes were sound. The villain was a sound villain. You had all of these things and all of these reasons from all the way from Iron Man to Endgame that
Right.
made sense and just resonated with people on a fundamental level. And I feel like, and it's the same thing with Black Widow that we talked about. It's like there's no identity or there's no, it's like they're trying to do a reset, but like they didn't bring that in. They didn't bring in the now what, or you know what I mean? So they struggled with the quality of Black Widow, in my opinion. In our opinion, we talked about it last week.
Right.
And then the quality of this, the real conflict is what? That's the thing that I think fell down. I don't think, and I want to come back to this for a second. I don't think it would have fallen flat for you, we're from the United States. I don't think the Eastern stuff would have fallen flat for you if the emotion was there, if the dad was fleshed out into a more believable villain or had a different reason for wanting to, you know, break through the wall, or if he was being manipulated by someone else, or if, you know what I mean? Like, if they
Right.
had shown that a little bit more, you would you wouldn't have gotten caught up on these smaller little things, and the Eastern stuff wouldn't. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're saying,
And so,
but
so I that's my, and I agree with you though. I agree with the point. Expanding their audience or bringing in the Asian culture and things and it not resonating with some of us. I agree with that, and I don't think every movie also has to be, you know, American centric or Western focused or any of that. I think it's one of those, you know, it's fine to expand, and I think we both agree on that. I think though that the quality of the movie, they missed something that could have resonated with everyone while being Eastern, East Asian focused, or maybe not focused, but you know what I mean? Like by bringing in some of that Asian culture and expanding the world back to other countries and things, but they just kind of fell flat with the quality of the writing in the film, and that shows.
okay, so let's move into reforging things. What would you change? What would be your motivation for the dad? What's his plot?
I think the dad's motivation is and should be, and I just came up with this on the fly. He's 1,000 years old. He's tired. He doesn't want. I don't think he wants to keep going. I think losing his wife was the final whatever, the final straw, and he, avenged his wife and he goes back to the rings. But I think his main motivation is I need Sean to take these rings from me so I can be a normal human and die. And very maybe that's a bleak outlook, but like you kind of have this thing where he's talking to Sean as a boy and saying, you need to prove that you're powerful enough or worthy enough or strong enough so that you can one day take the rings. And I feel like that should have been his motivation. Like, I can't get I can't get rid of the rings. They're bonded to me. Someone needs to be strong enough to take them away from me, and it's Sean. And Sean needs to do that. And I think if you frame it that way, then when Sean rejects working with him and trying to take the rings and all of these things, he is looking for the only other way that he can die, I guess. And so the Soul Eater thing kind of comes in here, and it's like, well, either way, either my son stops me and takes the rings and whatever, or does that make sense? What are your thoughts
I
on that?
see I see where you're going. I think that's an interesting idea. It's something that hasn't been done before. Um, I think you might have a hard time getting it to land. Um, but I think it's an interesting idea. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing something like that be tried. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. There might be some plot holes. I'm not able to
To think
pull
through
them out
that.
right now, but I'd have to take some time and sit down and go through, step by step how you
Zig, you froze for a second. You want to hit
did
me
I
with that
freeze?
again?
Sorry. So I think, I'd need to sit down and talk about or think about how you get from the beginning of the film to the end and, make sure that plot line is sound. But I think it's an interesting idea. I'd be willing to workshop it, honestly.
So go with me on this for a second. And put yourself into the shoes of a man who, I mean, I'm thinking of myself, okay? So, um, I got back from the Philippines in 2011, and from 2011 to 2023, 22, when I met Jane, that was, me just more or less being alone and lonely and whatever. And then you meet Jane, and she's gonna be mad that I brought her up. I'm sorry. Um, but I met my wife, and like immediately I'm happier. You saw that, right?
Mhm.
I'm happy. Uh, we just seem to fit. Everything is. And I'm not saying everything is perfect in my life, but like, you know, that joy and that happiness that comes from meeting your person. And you know this with Lou. You feel whole and complete. And that's something that for 1,000 years he never had. And then
Right.
he meets that person and, you know, is finally happy. And then when that gets taken away, the despair, at first you're driven by rage and wanting revenge and you do that. But at the same time, you know that like I can't, having known that happiness and having been alone for thousands of years, 1,000 years, not thousands, 1,000 years, that going back to just being alone, I don't know. I think that emotion there makes sense. And then you kind of, if you set it up right, um, more of this kind of, this is why I'm training Sean, and then he rejects that idea. I think that sets up the conflict better, and I think then he's starting to look for things that can that could potentially, end him, for lack of a better
Some
word.
or something to force Sean to come back and confront him.
Right. And
I
from the point of view of I mean, from you and I, that sounds like a ridiculous thing. But if you, after 1,000 years, get something into your mind that this is the only way forward, and you don't really trust anyone else, you trust your own thinking because you've been around for 1,000 years and have seen it all. I feel like I feel like that then is a really, really
Well,
strong reason
it's a
for him to. It's a
it's a
believable thing.
believable character flaw.
Right. And then you can see that he's like, okay, um, and maybe this is me giving him too much credit, but he's like, okay, he has this whole other side of himself that you know, hasn't been explored, his wife's family, and he needs to, you know, create some conflict and whatever, and so he goes there and he's gonna attack that place because that would motivate Sean to come back, I guess. I don't know.
Something like that.
Something like
A-
that.
As you talk about it, I'm reminded of Craven the Hunter, and not the film. I heard the film was absolute dog water, but in Spider-Man 2, the video game that came out 2021, 2021, Craven the Hunter is one of the villains, right?
Hmm.
And his whole thing is he wants to die in the hunt. He wants to finally hunt something that can kill him.
Right.
And he's disappointed every single time until, spoiler alert, Venom finally brutally destroys him,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like that can be kind of the angle that you take, right? You
Yeah.
need, you can't just off yourself
Right.
for either honor's sake or maybe there's something with the rings that prevents you from doing that. You have to be overcome, almost like the Elder Wand type thing,
Hmm.
but it's more of a curse than a blessing at that point.
Right.
But so I think it could work, honestly. I think it could work.
I think it would be interesting to try. That's what I would want to do. Because again, Honor, especially he's 1,000 years old. Honor has played a huge part in his entire life. That
Right.
is that is the culture of China, you know, honor, filial piety, all of these things. I feel like that would, he can't just give up. He
Right.
needs something to either take him down or, you know, to pass on to his son the burden of the rings. And so what I would do is you have this whole setup, you know, and you see him training and grooming Sean to take over the rings. Brutally, I might add. I mean, you see Sean punching the pillar over and over again, and and then he sends him out on this assassin, whatever, and then Sean doesn't come back because he doesn't want that. And I feel like that sets up the conflict nicely, and then you can show flashbacks of him telling Sean about the rings, about, uh what he wants, like I want to pass them on to you or whatever. You need to be strong enough, you need to be able to take them from me. And you kind of set up this inevitability of a conflict between the dad and Sean to the death, or close to it, for Sean to take the rings. And of course, from his dad's point of view, um, it's like inevitable. I need someone strong and ruthless and whatever that can handle these things. And from Sean's point of view, he's like, I don't want to be evil. I just want to have a family life with my dad. I just want to be normal. Um, I miss when our mom was here and then my dad changed and then, you know, all of this stuff. I don't want that. And so that kind of motivation. and his change in character development makes sense more. And then once Sean leaves, you know, you have that fight, the postcard that was from the sister but not from the sister that gets Sean back um, across the world. And then you show from that point of view um, flashbacks of the dad, researching other things, other plans, other ways to bring Sean back so that they can have this final thing, kind of manipulating from the background all of this stuff happening so that he can finally force the conflict that he's been preparing for and hoping for however long because he can't do it. And so then he finds this world-ending whatever. And in his mind, it's like either my son takes over and and saves the world, or the world doesn't need to exist anymore. And he kind of gets that all or nothing mentality because he's been around for so long and he's just tired and done and the loss that he has had and the losses over centuries are just piling on top of him. And then his only hope is for his son because that's all he can see. It's
Right.
either that or nothing. And he pins all of his hopes on Sean beating him, or he's going to end the world, and who cares?
Right. Okay. Well, I can get behind that, you know. And the thing that I think about is it's like these are all you're really doing is changing some of the writing. You
Hmm.
can keep all the same cinematography, you can keep the same story beats, but it's just change some of the writing, change the motivation, and
Hmm.
you've got a really good film, you know? And I feel like that's kind of been a big theme throughout this entire podcast.
Right.
You just need a little bit of like workshop your writing a little bit more, I don't know,
Hmm.
but
I
no, I
think,
can get behind something like that, and I think that would make it quite a lot better.
you know, I was talking about this literally a week ago with Mom and Jane. Um, my wife's been watching The Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime, and she's also been starting the books, the Wheel of Time books, and she keeps coming back to me and saying, "This is so much different than the book, and I don't like it, and it doesn't work." And after watching the first couple of episodes, I couldn't do the Amazon Prime series because I was already noticing differences and being a fan of the Wheel of Time series, I guess it galled me that the arrogance of all of these writers that they can take something that people love and rip it apart and say that they can do a better job by a committee and change things and move things around and you know rather than give the fans, give us what we wanted, which is a condensed version of the books. And again, there's so much content that you have to pick and choose like what you would put into a series.
Or
But like you can put the main plot points into the series and everyone would be happy,
right,
you know? But to change things and change the characters and move things around and just because you have the arrogance that you're writing by committee is, better than the source material. I think that I think that's where it falls down is you have so many people that want their own opinion on what's going to happen here and the writing and everything and how do you tie it in and all of this stuff that they forgot that each movie in and of itself needs to be a good movie or you're going to lose people.
Right.
And so, you lost a lot of real fans of The Wheel of Time because you didn't follow the plot, you changed things. It ended up, the contrast between what you expected and what you got was so different that you don't want to watch.
Right.
And so I know it's not one-to-one comparison, but I feel like that's the power of writing. If you write something well, whether that's a book or whether that's a movie or the adaptations or whatever, if you write something well and give a good story, then everything else falls into place.
Mhm.
But we get so caught up in, you know, magical powers and the CGI, and everything is CGI nowadays, and no one can really see the vision because everything is green screens, and so it doesn't come off as well as you want. And I don't know. I feel like that's the problem, is that they focus on the wrong things. Again, it's, go back to the sequel for Pirates that we reforged. They changed the motivation of Jack, or they changed him from who we loved in the first movie to a shell of himself. And
Exactly.
that's why it failed. If you go back and keep Jack at his core who he is, then, the movie practically writes itself. You can keep the same plot, the same villains, the same everything. Just make Jack have a backbone again, you know? And so I feel like that's the same thing. A little tweak here, change the motivations there, and this movie would have been probably my favorite Marvel movie since Iron Man, really. It's like you remember when Iron Man came out and you were like, whoa. I feel like this could have been that for the, stage four and beyond, for the multiverse saga, but it didn't land. And here we are,
Here we are.
reforging it.
Is there anything else that you would want to see changed in the movie?
So I don't, but I want you to think about what would you do to tie it into, the aftermath of Infinity War and Endgame. How would you show that, you know, that was your main first complaint. Weave that in with the story, but like show me what you would do, I guess, to not be overhanded about it, but show that there was an impact.
Well, I think a lot of it is show, don't tell, right? Show that when they're driving through the streets, have the contrast of them in the sports car driving, but then you see, you know, three families trying to live under one little tent with a sign saying, we blipped, please help. And just ha to have that contrast, or show, I don't know, the what's her name? Katie. Katie's apartment with her family is already cramped, and have them talk about, well, we had more room before so and so blipped back in, and I don't know,
Right,
something, right? Or talk about talk about the aftermath in New York, just have them mention something, say, I don't want you to go out there because of what happened in New York, with all that crap. Like just little things to make it feel like this is the same universe instead of everybody's oblivious. It felt like everybody was oblivious.
right.
And in, case in point, in the final scene when Wong comes and takes the two of them away, everybody in the bar is like stunned, right? And maybe what they were going for was, oh my gosh, these two are being called by a wizard, but
it felt more like what the heck is happening? You know what I mean? So just
Right,
it didn't feel connected, you know. At this point in the MCU, everybody know that mystical things happen,
right.
right? You know, and I don't know, I guess just show a little bit of that. That's all that I ask.
I
Is just to
think
show some of the aftermath.
I think I agree. Not think, I agree. What I would have wanted is, so they're in San Francisco. They, Sean gets the postcard. He has to go find and save his sister, apparently, from his dad. Um, what I think is I would have liked to see that aftermath in Macau where his sister is. Um, Something there that shows what happened outside of the United States because the blip happened everywhere, all
Right.
across the universe and everything. But it's like, okay, how did that impact? How did that impact, you know,
Hmm.
Macau? And I don't know. I can't. One, I've never been there, but I can't imagine being in Macau or Hong Kong or one of these big cities and half the population is gone. Like it would feel empty, right?
Right.
Um, but then how do you show how people would feel with all of them blipping back in, you know? I feel like that could have been something. To your point, they blip, they don't need as big of an apartment, so they move into a smaller shop above or a smaller apartment above their shop, and then everyone blips back and now they're in a crowded apartment.
Right. Just
Something like
something.
that could have, and maybe tie it into the underground, you know.
Hmm.
There's this underground fight club that the sister, forms and runs because she's capable and smart and everything. But like maybe she was able to do that because 5 years ago there was the blip. She filled this power vacuum. It came back. I don't know. A little side thing right there could have gone a long ways for me.
Well, I think that's a really good idea too, is to say, well, yeah, there's this power vacuum in the underground, and that's why the sister started to fill it, you know. But just something, you know, it doesn't need to be huge, doesn't need to be the focus of the film,
Right.
but just add a little more in there, you know.
Again, it's adding a tiny bit here and there that elevates it. Um, Because again, and we didn't even talk about this. I thought the fight scene in the bus in San Francisco, Zach just left. Um, I'm gonna finish that point. I thought the fight scene in the bus in San Francisco was fantastic. I thought they did an awesome job, and I think Zach would agree if he can find the link and show back up. Um, that that was an amazing, the cinematography, the fights, all those things were awesome. It just needed something to tie it together. I was saying we didn't talk much about any of the cinematics, but I think the fight scene on the bus was fantastic. I loved the fight in the building in Macau and with the bamboo and all of those things.
Oh yeah, those things were great. You know, the fights, the choreography, the cinematography was great. I didn't have any problem with any of that.
Right,
But, you know, and I feel like my complaints start flip-flopping between films. They can't seem to nail both of these things,
right.
you know, and you really do need both to make an excellent film.
Absolutely. And so that was my point. If we could have just um if you could just tweak some of the writing here, you would have had a fantastic film. Add a little bit there, change the motivation. I feel like that would have elevated this film a lot more. You tie it in a little bit to the rest of the world, showing how it affected outside that Endgame actually happened. That it's not just a mystical movie, set in China or about a whatever. You know what I mean? That it
Right.
comes back in, it ties in. I think you're right. And if you do that and then you change the dad's motivation, I think the film would have been amazing. But with that said, and you not showing up, I think that's where we're going to end it for today. Any final thoughts?
No, I think really that sums it up. It wasn't a bad film. I'm excited to see him come back
Hmm.
uh, and interact with other characters in the universe, or even have his own standalone sequel. I would be excited to go see something like that.
Right. Well, what did all of you think? Why don't you drop a comment about what you would have done? Did we hit the mark? Are we right? Are we wrong? What would you have changed? You can't see Zach here, but over where Zach should be, this is our last video, and over top of me is a link to all of our videos from the past. You should check them out. And I think we're going to end there. I've been Trevor. This over here, empty chair, used to be Zach. Now he is a ghost. And we will be back next week.